Hello, everyone. So, I'd like to do something a little bit different today in terms of how I'm going to approach my review. And I want to be very upfront. This is not a hot take. This is something that I've actually been thinking about for months and months, dare I say, and just kind of reviewing and going over in my head. And it's not perfect. Okay, this is going to be a very organic kind of video in the sense that I'm going to build my case for how I think Rick and Morty is going to end. And it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a little bit of a slog in a sense. So if this sounds interesting to you, if you'd like to hear about how I think Rick and Morty is going to end, and then hear how I get to that inevitable conclusion, or at least how I see it to a degree as an inevitable conclusion, go ahead and stick around. Now, I will save you some time and tell you up front my thought in terms of how I think it's going to end. Ultimately, I think it's going to conclude with Rick destroying the portal gun. Now, I can already hear some of you out there in the world saying, it doesn't matter. Oh, you nihilists, you know that it doesn't really matter in the sense of there are an infinite number of Ricks, some who make the decision to never make the portal gun, some who destroy it, some who keep it, all of that stuff. I'm going to address that issue along the way here, okay? But ultimately, I do think that Rick is going to have to destroy the portal gun or make the choice to destroy his portal gun because he already knows. We're starting to see that crack in him, that breakup in his mind. He already knows that by keeping or having the choice of keeping the portal gun, it can only lead to the destruction of himself. Not necessarily even death, but the destruction of the self, of his version of Rick, the one that he biologically owns. As well as it's going to lead to the loss of his family. Now, Rick's atheism in this actually manifests itself in a really interesting way in this series. It appears to follow some form of Nietzschean nihilism, right? But it's not as straightforward as you might think, because nihilism itself is often presented as a kind of philosophy, which it's probably actually more closely aligned with a psychology than a philosophy. Now, I'm going to say up front as well that I'm aligning my thoughts or myself with a certain kind of reading of nihilism, one that places Nietzsche against the common postmodern interpretations. I think sometimes Nietzsche gets a bit of a bad rap as someone who believes that life is meaningless and there is no objective truth, or at least that objective truth was somehow an impossibility. These are actually byproducts of what Nietzsche saw coming out of the nihilistic mindset, that psychology again. Rather, I think Nietzsche was more concerned about what he believed could emerge with the destruction of what we would call a priori values, right? Pure values or pure truth of things like good, evil, right, wrong, etc., etc. Even the French philosopher or social philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre in Existentialism is a Humanism, he mentions also this same kind of concern about the loss of a priori values, like perfect truths or perfect value systems, with the loss of God. So in other words, Nietzsche could pronounce that God is dead, right? But in doing so, he knew that humanity was also simultaneously losing that value system that is created in that Judeo-Christian background. Now, with the loss of that value system of Judeo-Christianity, something is going to have to replace that. In a perfect Nietzschean world, it would likely be replaced by a sincere embrace of drives, because it's through the drives that the truly gifted individuals would be able to find a kind of freedom that was necessary to express themselves perfectly without the burden of a value system holding them back. So what happens when you have no a priori value system? You don't have the values, the things that keep you connected to your family, to right and wrong, to belief in something greater than yourself, in a sense. What do you do? This is what Nietzsche was concerned about when it comes to nihilism, is being caught or trapped in a place where you could neither your drives weren't great enough to overcome the pull toward the need for values and meaning, right? For things like family, love, and other values of human experience. You're trapped in a perpetual state of sorrow and meaninglessness because you can't embrace the values, but nor can you let them go. This is essentially nihilism, or at least one of the readings of nihilism. And this is what Nietzsche predicts will be the state of Europe for 200 years. So, how does this connect back to Rick? Let's start moving there. Now, there is a temptation to say that Rick is a postmodern character. On the surface, he fits all the categories of postmodernism, right? He's skeptical, ironic, and irreverent toward grand narratives. However, this is just the surface level reading of him. In actuality, he's much more of a neo-modern character, a type of character that emerges out of the wake of postmodernism. And every few episodes, Rick goes through a kind of existential crisis. And although many of us love the irreverence of Rick, right, which is the comedy of the show, it's these existential crises that I believe takes the show to a point of brilliance. There are two specific kind of parts or episodes of the series where I think it manifests itself more than any other. The first place that you start to see this emerge in Rick, this kind of crisis, is in season 1, episode 11, when Bird Person tells Morty what wubba lubba dub dub actually means, right? Because if you recall, even before the show came out, there were kind of hints of this, and wubba lubba dub dub became a kind of war cry for fun, in a sense, right? You're laughing at it. And then all of a sudden, here comes Bird Person, and Bird Person translates it and says that it means, I'm in great pain. Please help me. Now, this is not the expression of someone who is in need of philosophy. This is a declaration of his state of being, of the very nature of how he exists in time. It's psychological, and even Rick knows that there is a difference between, say, using science and technology to zap someone's mind to make them seem like they feel happy, versus having to face the fact that the words that describe his usual state of existence are the horror of being. Now, secondly, and the most important episode, at least for my reading of this interpretation of Rick and Morty here, is season 4, episode 2, The Old Man and the Seat. This is about a guy named Tony who uses Rick's private toilet, and it's actually quite a moving episode, but not why we might think. What's sad about this episode is not the death of Tony himself, right? It's the fact that for a brief moment in time, when Tony's alive, Rick can feel the meaning of his current biological existence. And it's one based on values, on his relationship to Tony or with Tony, right? And Rick even tries to undermine this because he's uncomfortable with having that kind of meaningful in the time frame connection with Tony, right? 2 points, he tries to undercut his own relationship and own sort of meaningful engagement with Tony. The first time is in that boardroom or his office or something like that with Tony, where Tony explains that, his wife passed away, and Rick uses his portal gun, goes and finds another version of Tony, brings him in, and that Tony that he brings in, of course, his wife is still alive, and he forces that Tony by gunpoint to tell his current biological Tony that his wife is alive and this and that and all that stuff, right? But it doesn't work. It doesn't undercut because Tony in our Rick's biological universe, that Tony doesn't attach any value to what any other Tony has to say. And so it's not meaningless. In the infinity or the infinitude of Tonys and of Tony wives means nothing to our Rick's Tony. And there's something about that that's so great or so disturbing to our Rick that he tries to even do it again. He enjoys the relationship, the play with his Tony. But then you'll recall too, at Tony's funeral, Rick tells Tony's father, if it makes you feel any better, I went looking for other Tonys, and there's a Tony who was incredibly fulfilled in life, but that fulfillment led to him becoming like a genocidal maniac. And again, that line is completely meaningless to our Tony's father, because he's built up a value system of relationship, of meaning with just his biological Tony. And for Rick, this creates a really intense existential crisis that maybe he was starting to build up a biological, meaningful relationship with his Tony as well before he passed away. Now, in this episode, Rick is confronting Nietzsche's greatest fears when it comes to engendering a nihilistic mindset, right? Although there is no one in any universe that's smarter than Rick, right? He is largely unfulfilled, actually, by his drives. Think about those hedonistic episodes where he's going off to, to sleep with this or to do that or to kill this person. All these drives of power and all these kind of things, it still leaves him largely unfulfilled. And it's the one person who is not a family member of Rick's that's able to put him in his place, you might recall, is the psychiatrist in the Pickle Rick episode. And it's a brilliant episode because you have the perfect example of Pickle Rick is the perfect example of a kind of nihilism gone crazy, right? I'm going to do this because I can. He's driven to to become a pickle. And the psychiatrist is the one who makes him see what you're doing has nothing to do with drives. It's a psychological problem that you're conveying here. That you've reached a certain point where your drives are leading you to unfulfilled, meaningless desires. He's a Nietzschean man of sorrow because even though he's great in terms of his brilliance, right? He cannot break away from the value system of his family and of still sort of deep down wanting to be connected to humanity. And because he can't fully embrace his drives only and let go of the values of his family and interacting with other human beings, he is the nihilistic Nietzschean man of sorrow, just sort of trapped. He'll never become truly great or the kind of Übermensch that Nietzsche talks about, that is completely driven by drives. So where does that leave us in our discussion here? Well, Rick has two choices. He can either go all in on Nietzschean, ideals and become a kind of Übermensch who allows the drives to dictate the great things that he can do, right? Meaning that if you let Rick just do his own things without the attachment to the family, it's likely that he's going to create truly wonderful things, even better than what he has shown in the show itself. Or he can give up that idea that he can choose the more mundane life, a life with systems of values, of connection to family, to humanity, to beliefs in good, bad, right, and wrong. But in doing so, he'll have to accept the fact that he will not reach the heights that he could have if he had just sort of gone full Ubermensch, if you'll allow me to say. And so that takes me again to where I began with this video. How do I think this is going to end? I think that all signs for me point to Rick making the decision to destroy the portal gun. Now, I know that many of you are thinking to yourself, it doesn't matter, right? Because again, the infinite number of Ricks, where if he really wanted to, another Rick, he could always make the portal gun again, maybe, or another Rick could show up with the portal gun and he could take it, or even just the mere philosophical thought that there are other Ricks out there with portal guns or without portal guns, that idea in some way takes away from the choice of Rick to destroy the portal gun. My argument to that would be actually it makes the choice more important because it is a choice that he can own. I'm making the choice even with the knowledge in the back of my mind that in some way it doesn't matter philosophically. It actually matters more metaphysically, meaning he's transcending the limitations of the philosophical logic of the human being to say, I'm choosing to live the rest of my biological life without this access to the infinite world. And that's my choice to make. And in doing so, I choose family, loved ones, belief in right and wrong, that kind of a thing. In actuality, it makes the choice far greater. So that's my spiel here. That's my organic thinking on the topic. Ultimately, that's where I see the show ending as well, is that he's going to choose to destroy the portal gun. My question for you all, I guess, for the comment section here is, one, let me know if you disagree, that's totally fine, or if you agree. All I ask is that you include any sort of agreement or disagreement with, give me some thought behind it. Tell me why. That kind of a thing, okay? Just so we can actually have a genuine conversation of thoughtfulness. Again, not a hot take video here. I've put a lot of thinking into this, and I'm willing to have my thoughts challenged and to connect with all of you in other ideas about this as well. So I guess a couple of the questions that I would have for you is, do you think that there is a possibility that Rick could keep the portal gun and still maintain a kind of value-driven life with the family? Or are you starting to see that crumble happening like I am? That the two just can't seem to exist together for much longer because of the impact that it's also having on the family as well. What do you think? I'm curious.